Hi, I'm Alex McDowell. I'm a creative director, production designer in film. I teach that at USC. This is my lab, World Building Media Lab. And I'm creative director at 5D Global Studio, which is a design studio for the 21st century. You know, I think world building is, in some sense, world building is an easy metaphor for people to understand because it's really about how do you engage holistically with the world space. Film and game were so siloed that I was working in parallel without really understanding that game engines were the game changer. You know, a huge shift occurred for me in my thinking about myself as a designer, that I could collaborate in real time with my peers, with people, you know, across disciplines, and even if I'm entirely working in a cinema space, a production designer's job is first to design the production. I think what that means is that it's our job to immerse the whole crew, long before an audience comes in the environment of the narrative. Now with Minority Report, it wasn't just the images, but it was actually the techniques and the technologies that we wanted people to take on board. The other piece of it was that I think Steven Spielberg, maybe for the first time, was using previs to direct. So even though he'd certainly used it before, I think Minority Report was the film where previs became a fundamental tool. So that meant that Steven could go in and direct action in an animated simulation that would then be passed on as data to all the different departments that had to execute it. So by the time we came to shoot, the way in which the car was going to be composited into the background and the rig that was going to carry it, or, I mean, all sorts of complex motion control rigs that were controlling the sort of fine detail of action were being predetermined in the virtual space, in the design visualization. And Steven Spielberg was engaging fully in that space. So I think that has become completely the common way to work now. It's a very intuitive way to work for directors, cinematographers, designers, visual effects. But at that time it was radical. Leviathan is sort of the first step towards the multitude of experiments that need to happen in VR. Haptics is a big part of this technological development, which means that we want real feedback in the world. We don't want to reach out for a virtual object and have it be thin air. If you reach out for something that looks like a chair, and it is a chair in the virtual world, and you can sit in it, there's sort of an enormous satisfaction that everybody who's been through the lab with that experience really feels. And all of the research we're doing is learning better languages, learning how to communicate better with each other, developing platforms that allow us to work better together in order to tell better stories that are actually going to have kind of the impact on the world that stories were designed for. We've started making stories that are more about whether Batman and Superman are going to get along. It's perfectly fine. I'm really a big fan of comics and fantasy, but it's not going to make a really big impact in the world. I think what matters in the world is these new stories we tell. I think that seems like the exciting space to be now.